Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How's things going on the West Coast today?
Things are going quite well. It's the end of summer here. It's just about to be Labor Day. There's just that feeling of like, oh, summer's gone. I think the school started around here, so there's more traffic happening. You know, it's kind of like everybody gearing up for fall, getting ready to start in on their lives again. It always feels like things calm down, and then right now everybody gets all revved up to go.
It's so strange. The last week has been weather-wise here has been great. And it feels like fall is starting to hit. I mean, Washington, D.C., usually we are still in a sweat box until, at least mid, if not late September. And it's been mid 70s all week.
Nice.
And sort of
beautiful.
Everybody's sort of thinking, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop? What are we expecting now? So no, and it's great. Kids went back to school this week and everything's moving. Traffic's a little worse as it's going to be, but overall not too bad.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we're speaking of that. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what?
No, go ahead. Please.
We are presumably just back from a wonderful trip to Southern California to teach in person. Our Moving Conversations live at Blue Moon. The event went great. We absolutely loved it. And we just can't wait to basically do it again. So if you're interested in having us come and work at your studio, give you some information, meet us live, we'd love to do that. So let us know.
Absolutely. We'd love an opportunity to see everybody in person, have you come and learn from us. And I mean, doing it live, there's so much more practicality that can be done, which is awesome. So you can actually feel what your body is feeling in space and seeing from us what we mean by certain things, because through an audio source, you can only get so much. And even through our YouTube, you can only get so much. And we're sort of limited as to what we can do on Instagram and the amount of time too. So this just gives an opportunity for us to expand, have great questions, and really go deep in on subjects that we can't always go as deep in on when we're doing it in the audio format. So it was awesome. Can't wait to do it again. So if you are interested in having us come, we'd love to talk with you. You can always hit us up. Gmail's account is probably the best way to email us. movingconvos@gmail.com is the easiest way, and we will respond. You can also DM us, Moving Convos, on Instagram, and we will respond to that as well. And those are our socials. So please do us a favor, like, subscribe, share, all the good stuff. We really appreciate it. They say that less than about 30% of our regular listeners actually do subscribe, but subscriptions make a difference as to how many people see us when people look for us under podcasts and things. So do us a favor. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do. We really appreciate it. And that way, every Tuesday, we're in your inbox. It's right there. You can listen to us at your leisure. So we really appreciate it. Now, this week, you and I like what you said earlier. We were speaking a little bit before we hit the record button, how this is today's topic. We've danced around it a little bit, but we haven't gone into it in great detail. So I'm going to let you introduce the topic, but I like the way you said that. Yeah, we have spoken about it, but nothing specific yet. So yeah, I think this will be a good opportunity for us to talk about this.
What we want to talk about is essentially movement analysis. And what I mean by that is, if I have a client where I'm trying to improve a particular skill, let's say they're a swimmer or they're a runner or they're having trouble lifting things up, right? Whatever the situation is, how do I figure out how to progress them up to that skill? So this is one of the things too that, as an educator for Balanced Body for years and years, in teaching new teachers, this was always the question that stumped them. It's like, how do I get from A to B? How do I break something down or understand what skills are necessary or what skills are missing to achieve something in the Pilates world like teaser, something like that? And so understanding all the elements of a skill somebody's trying to build is a really useful way to go. Okay, so they've got that skill, they've got that skill. They don't seem to have the range of motion, or they don't seem to have the strength, they don't seem to have something, the coordination for that particular thing to move forward. Where are we going to focus our training to get that better?
And let's keep this in mind. A skill can be anything. A lot of
Yes.
people think skill is required in something like dance or in sports or any type of athletic or something of that, an endeavor like that. But a skill can be any exercise. If you're just trying to get them to
Yes.
do a one-legged balance, that's a skill. If you want
Right.
them to do a
Absolutely.
lunge, that's a skill. Or like you said, teaser, something that's a little bit more advanced. Those are all skills. And that's what we do is we teach these skills. We teach these exercises every day. And sometimes, I mean, you and I have been there. How many times you think someone can do something and then they do it, and you're like, "Ooh, that didn't
Hmm.
look like what I thought it was going to look like."
Right.
Okay, that's yeah. We gotta change that a little bit. Let's modify that. And how I always break this down is I call it regression to progression.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
The story I've told in many classes was I was at a fitness conference and taking a class from Douglas Brooks, who is high level Bosu master. And he was literally demonstrating things like jumping from a Bosu onto a ball, back on the Bosu. He was showing off a little bit to entertain the crowd. I totally get that. But all of his exercises were pretty advanced. And I had a staff member there who said, I can't do any of this with any client. And she was getting a little huffy with it, thinking that she was wasting your time. And I said, well, let's take this last exercise, regress it. Now regress it again. Now regress it again. And I got her to think, oh, you can regress something down to its basic ways, regress it 10 times until they're basically doing something so simple that they can achieve that. But you can also take the exact opposite and take any basic skill and progress it, which I think in the fitness world, we have a tendency to think much more progression than regression. We
Yeah.
want to think of making things harder, more intense, putting more weight, putting more sophistication, putting more organization of the skill set into it. And I think a lot of what we really need to do is work on that regression aspect.
And I want to speak about it not just as regression of a particular exercise. So, taking one piece of that exercise or just making that exercise simpler, but also understanding what skill is lacking. Sometimes you
Oh,
have to do a
yeah,
completely different exercise to get to the
absolutely.
place where you want to go. I mean, the classic on that is any situation where somebody doesn't have the range of motion that you're looking for.
Yep.
Right? You think about doing doing like, a lunge, for example, and somebody doesn't have much hip extension.
Yep.
And then so that lunge is always going to look kind of funky because they can't get that leg, that back, let's say it's a 90-90 lunge, they can't let that back leg right underneath them. That knee won't go underneath them because they don't have the hip extension. Well,
Yeah.
that's not about just making, a lower lunge or going shorter range or something like that. It's really about changing the range of motion in their hip so that they can actually achieve even the beginning of the position you need to do for the exercise.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes that's what the regression will require is for it to be broken down to the point where can they even stand in that position in a staggered stance
Right.
and
Exactly.
maintain their balance. So sometimes you do. And it really requires you to look at what you want to accomplish and being able to, as you said, analyze what's that person doing well, but
Right.
also what aren't they doing,
Yes.
and becoming more of the body detective at that moment and saying, oh, okay, they're lacking this, this, and this. So how do I get that so that the next time I ask this extra to them to do this skill, that they're able to accomplish it?
Right. And then also, when you're thinking about progressing a client, and I think about particular clients I have in mind at the moment, I think about like sometimes it takes a while to get to the point, like they may be able to do the exercise not well, like that happens for sure. But
Mhm.
how do I improve that skill level? And oftentimes it's not just by repetition of that exercise, it's by, okay, we need to do this first, we need to prepare the body to be able to have that
Yeah.
coordination, that integration, that stability, that mobility, whatever the skills are that they need to actually accomplish that.
I like that. I like that. Well, let's take a simple exercise then. Let's take
Okay.
something like a squat that
Yep.
you and I would think is a simple exercise in general, but let's face it. How many times have you had someone squat and they just can't do it because they're lacking something in the chain,
Yep.
because
Absolutely.
unlike a bicep curl or something that's only involving one joint against gravity, it's pretty simple. Something like a squat, while it seems easy, there's a lot of joints in motion. It's a very compound, complex movement that, while we take for granted, can be challenging to someone, especially if they have certain limitations.
Right. So exactly. So I think a squat's a nice place to start in terms of thinking about that because there's so many elements of that, and there's so many ways it goes wrong,
Yep.
or so many ways it's less than optimum for that person. Like in some ways, I often start when I am working with somebody with a squat on just understanding, can they squat, right? Can they get
Hmm.
down and back up, and how far can they get down and back up without needing assistance?
Yeah.
And I know this is like major regression, but the first thing I start with is, let's say they're getting out of a chair, like I've just done my
Bingo.
intake, they're sitting in the chair. Do they use both hands on the front of the desk to push them up out of the chair, or do they use one hand maybe on the armrest to push them up out of the chair, or do they just stand up out of the chair?
Yep.
Right? And then do they need those hands to get them up out of the chair, or can they just stand up? So like step one is, do they have just the fundamental leg strength, basically, and endurance or strength really, to get up out of the
Hmm.
chair, right? Step one,
Yeah.
right? If not,
And
then I've got to, yeah.
yeah, that to me is the most important way to start.
Mhm.
Especially,
Yeah.
you and I work with a lot of clients who have injuries, obviously. And a lot of them are going to be, let's just say it, are on the older side. They're not going to be 20-year-olds. They're more likely to be over 50 that we're working with,
And if there's injuries, there may be deconditioning as well. Like they may not
and
have
a
done
lot of
something for a long
deconditioning.
time because of pain or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's a lot of people who didn't grow up around athletics or didn't grow up doing something like a squat. So they really don't understand how to do it. So if you ask them to squat, they may look at you kind of like, I don't really know what you're asking, but everybody knows
Right.
how to get up and down out of a chair.
Right.
And you're right. First of all, can they do it without help? Can they do it with just their body weight? Can they do it? How far? And what I'm looking for are, okay, if they, first of all, are they using their arms? If they are,
Yep.
okay, that's one thing. Do they use both arms? Do they have to
Yep.
turn around and push off
Right.
on one side? We've seen that.
Yeah.
And if they're not using their arms, okay, where is their center of gravity? Are they leaning to one side versus the other? Are they leaning too far
Yep.
forward? Are they leaning too far back? Where are their feet? Do they lack ankle mobility? Are their feet so far out in front of them because they can't bend their ankles enough to get their weight forward onto their toes?
Yeah. Yeah.
All of these things I want to look at. And in just 3 or 4 or 5 repetitions, I can see all of this. And then and that's the analysis. I'm analyzing, okay, for this person, they're not using their arms now. Fantastic. But they're doing this huge body swing. Well, what's limited? It's their ankles. Their feet are
Right.
too far out in front of them, or they're
Yep.
sitting too far back in the chair that they can't transfer their weight forward efficiently enough. So they're not getting their weight over their feet. So then I want to look at that and try and get them in the best position possible to see if they can even do it properly.
Right. Right. And some of that too is like they may just, in that case, they may not have the dorsiflexion mobility, right? They may not
Exactly.
have more than 90 degrees of dorsiflexion in their ankle, which is not that uncommon at all.
Not
And you'll see
uncommon.
that immediately in a squat. Like these are the clients who, even if they're pretty proficient with a squat, they go not very far down and those heels pop up, right?
Yep.
Because they don't have that range of motion, which is fine, just is what it is. But that's something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Um, the next thing, right? So thinking about just, can they do it? Do they have the strength to do it? And then you're thinking, okay, how am I going to build up that strength? Or let's take range of motion first. Let's take mobility, because one of the things that I often look at with any skill is, can they actually achieve the position I want them to achieve?
Yes.
Right. And if their ankles are that tight, they really can't do a squat very well because they can't get their weight in the middle of their foot. Their weight's always going to be a little bit back, or they're going to be way up on their toes, which is another situation. So do
Hmm.
they have the mobility? And I think about that in In Pilates, I'm thinking about something like feed-in straps. If I've got somebody on the reformer for feed-in straps, do they have enough hamstring range of motion to keep themselves, their low back neutral when their legs are pointing up toward the ceiling? Like a
Yeah.
lot of times they don't. Like if they're super tight in their hamstrings, as soon as those legs come up towards, a 90-90 line with their body, their low back is going to go into flexion because they don't have the hamstring mobility.
Yes.
So always looking at like, can they achieve what you're trying to achieve in terms of a position? Is kind of where I often start.
I like that. I like that. And there is something that I like to refer to as fish or cut bait. Because
Okay.
there are going to be times if I want them to do feet and straps, for instance, and they can't maintain that position, can I limit their range of motion to
Right.
make it still effective?
Yeah.
Or is it time to just say, you know what? They're not getting enough out of this. I'm going to work on that first skill at lengthening their hamstrings first. I want to work on that, lengthening it in an active way, because just stretching it doesn't always work. So learning how to lengthen it in an active way, would that be more beneficial for them versus continuing to hammer out the repetitions to try and get that range of motion? So you have to really decide which is going to be most beneficial for that client in front of you.
Right. Like to use this example, to continue this example, I could put them on the trap table or the tower where they start with less range of motion and they can still get like hamstrings going or whatever you're trying to get going. That would be an option to get the purpose of that exercise in a somewhat regressed way,
Mhm.
right? And at the same time, or similarly, I would say, okay, and we also need to lengthen those hamstrings if that's possible. Because the other thing too
Mhm.
is, sometimes clients are never going to get the ability that you want them to get to achieve that exercise
Yeah.
fully. That happens all the time, especially with something
Yes.
like hamstring flexibility or ankle dorsiflexion in a squat. Like some people just aren't. That's not going to happen in this lifetime. So then it's also just like, how do I modify? What am I willing to compromise in terms of the exercise
Mhm.
to be able to get the benefit out of it and modify it for that client in front of me?
Yeah. And that's a great question that I'm not sure if now's the best time to go into it, but I'm going to ask you. In something like the squat, for instance, this came up. I was teaching a few weeks ago in West Palm Beach, and the question came up about elevating someone's heels if they lack dorsiflexion in a squat. And I know where I lie on that is I'm not a big fan of doing that because it changes the biomechanics. It changes the amount of pressure that's on the knee, the amount of shear force pushing against the patella tendon, all of that. It really changes the kinematics of the exercise. Yes, they
Mm-hmm.
can get lower in the squat. Yes, they can achieve a deeper squat. They get better deep hip flexion, but it compromises other joints and it really takes into account that elevated heel. And I told the crew, I said, you do you make the decision based on the client in front of you. There's no absolutes rights or wrong. I rarely will choose to do that myself just because I'd rather work on the ankle dorsiflexion or limit their other range of motion in that way. So they're not going as deep into the squat or adjust their foot positioning wider, changing the angle of their hips or whatnot, because sometimes that can help too. So that I think is a question that also needs to be answered is when do you make that decision to modify it that significantly?
So I think for me, some of that, there's two things there. One is how important is the squat to that person, right?
Mhm.
Like if I've got somebody who, let's say is an avid gardener, and so they're going to be down in a squat or some version of it,
Mhm.
or a lunge, or on their knees, whatever, regularly, and coming
Mhm.
up and down off the ground regularly, or somebody who has small children who will be coming up and down off the ground regularly,
Mhm.
then I may choose to say, okay, it's more important that they are able to go down that low and up efficiently and effectively. So I may say, yes, for you, I will let you lift your heels and we'll play with that, getting balance and strength with that difference in biomechanics
Mhm.
potentially.
Mhm.
Now I'm also going to work on them on like, let's take a lunge instead and let's find other ways to get up and down. So I'll modify the exercise, but I'm also thinking this is somebody who's probably going to end up going down and up a bunch, and I want them to be able to have that full range. Then I might say, okay, so for you to have that full range, your heels are going to come up.
Yeah.
So let's train you to be able to do that with your heels up, with good biomechanics as we can get, and with the strength and support that you need to do that safely or ideally. Yeah. So that would be one situation.
Hmm. So it
Um,
comes down to function for those people. And like I
yeah.
say, there's no
Yeah.
no such thing as bad exercise. It matters on, does it provide more function for what they need to do, whatever their ultimate goal is. So like you say, getting up and
Yeah.
down the floor, obviously. And I will teach that to some clients, even getting up and down out of a chair. I want their feet back further so they can transfer more weight forward, and their heels always come up, always. But again, it's coming up and down a few times. It's not overloading their body with a huge amount of weight on their back or anything like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a different animal entirely, you know. So
Yeah.
we just have to figure out, what is their goal. I like that you put it that way. What is the goal for that client to be able to have better function for what? What is their end game?
Right. Because some people live a life which is they go to work, they drive to work, they come home, they like to walk, they like to bicycle, maybe like they like to do a few things, and if they're active, but they're not somebody who is that deep squat is important to them. In that
Yep.
case, I may really focus on, let's not go into deep squats for you. Let's play with lunges and other things, other exercises we can play with for you, for sure, to get strength and stuff going for you. But we're not going to do that because the biomechanics are just not optimum for you,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So that might be a choice that I make with somebody who doesn't need that deep squat or isn't really going to use that. That's not important to them.
Yeah. And sometimes it's also just finding the modification that does work for them. Do they need to be wider stance? Do they need to be more narrow
Right.
stance? Do they need to be, however they need to do whatever they need to do modification wise? So I agree. I agree. Those are important things to think about.
Or if you're going down and up from the ground, it's like, okay, let's find another way for you to go down and up from the ground, right? So take it
Yeah.
in a lunge, take it in some other version. So thinking about what the end goal is, thinking
Yep.
about how you either regress the exercise or regress the skills required for the exercise.
Yep.
So let's continue with squat a bit and just think about what other skills are required for a good squat. So I would say, like, understanding like lumbopelvic positioning a little bit. So
Hmm.
where is my pelvis? Because somebody can go down into a squat and try to keep their back flat against a wall. That's a pretty
Yes.
common version, like a plie in dance. Right? That's
Hmm.
going to give you very different mechanics and put stress in different places than actually keeping like shoulders roughly over the knees in a squat. And then
Yep.
does the back arch? Does the back go into posterior tilt, or flexion or extension, or posterior tilt or anterior tilt? Like, where is the pelvis in that? Because that
Hmm.
can make a big difference in somebody hurting when they do a squat or not hurting when they
Yeah.
do a squat, or causing stress on their back or their knees or other things.
Absolutely. And something else to think about is, when you're looking at the way that they are squatting, can they achieve that neutral or
Right.
lumbopelvic positioning and control during the exercise? And does it change because they may be structured a little different, shorter femur than tibia, longer femur than tibia? In those situations, you may say, I had one client whose femur was a lot longer than her tibia. So every time she went down, she would lose her lumbopelvic control. She would bend at the
Mm-hmm.
waist forward, because for
Mm-hmm.
her to get any way down, she needed to transfer so much body weight forward to counterbalance herself.
Interesting.
Whereas someone who has a shorter femur and a longer tibia, they can stay more upright because of just the biomechanics. Their center of gravity stays over their ankle joint, and they're able to do it a little bit more. I remember this client,
I hadn't thought of that.
yeah, she was very proud of her legs. She was in her 60s, but she said, went back in the 1960s when mini skirts came out, I rocked those mini skirts. It was great. And I had her squat, and she had the most unique squat where she was literally looked like she was in Japan, bowing from the waist, bowing as she was
Ah,
squatting down. And I was watching her, and I said, wait a minute. And I measured greater trochanter
ah,
to her knee, and
yeah.
then knee to ankle. And looking at it, I said, wow, you almost have a 1.5 ratio, whereas
Wow.
it's you I probably would say 4 or 5 inches longer in her femur than her
Wow.
tibia. And
Wow.
that's significant. Most people are closer to
Yes.
50-50. But it was
Yeah.
so significant that she did that and she had that bow. So for her, there was no way to really achieve a deep squat in a traditional way. We had to modify it a lot. And I found a real wide stance really helped for her. Everybody's a little different. It took that out of it. And if you think about widening the squat, it brought her knees from the side. You could see the knees sort of go back toward the hips a little bit as the knees got wider, from the back. So her center of gravity could stay over her ankles better. So I was like, okay, that works for her. So it
Oh,
all came down to physics in that sense.
yeah.
And likewise, I had a gentleman who was a world champion squatter. He was maybe 5'5" tall and maybe 5'5" wide. He was a gigantic man, width-wise. But I looked at his legs and I said, "You have some of the shortest femurs I've ever seen." But his tibias were fairly long. It had
Ah,
let him handle so much more weight when he squatted.
oh, that is so interesting.
So it was really about the biomechanics and their specific, idiosyncrasies to their bodies.
And this is also where movement analysis is really important. Like you took
Incredibly
that
important.
analysis to a pretty deep level because you were like, why does this look so different
Yeah.
than somebody else doing this? Right. And you actually took the time to analyze it and understand the bones are in a different relationship to each other. And that is going to change how everything else works.
Yeah.
Right. So
But
that's another, yeah.
yeah, with that first person though, my initial reaction was, "Oh, it's gotta be her ankles." Because
Uh-huh.
to get her in a good position, her heels came up all the time, and she's someone who did wear heels a lot in her professional life. So
Right.
immediately my thoughts started to go there until I really took a real close look and wait, she has good ankle dorsiflexion.
Right.
Because I measured that and I thought, no, her ankle dorsiflexion should be sufficient enough for a squat.
Yeah.
And in a lunge, she could do it. She could get down into a lunge with no problem. I'm thinking, wait a minute, something else is going on here. So we sometimes have to go a little bit deeper. And it does come down to that movement analysis. How do they look when they move? And that was really where I started getting the finer points of that, going, oh, okay, she's losing her spine and she's not able to dorsiflex from her ankle, but it has nothing to do with those two. It's actually the bones.
Which is, again, this is where looking closely. We talked a lot about this when we talked to Tom McCook in one of our sessions recently. Uh, when you look closely at somebody like you have to you look at kind of what you think you're looking for, right? You have a vision in your
Mhm.
mind of what that exercise is supposed to look like, and then
Yeah.
you've got to look at that client and go, okay, so what is it matching what I think it should look like? Where are things weird? They're asymmetrical, or again, the folds are in funny
Mhm.
places, like their back is too curved or their back is too arched or whatever it is. And then you also then have to look at kind of like then take a step back and go, okay, that looks funny. And where does it look funny? Recognizing that. And then trying to look at, again, those bones, which I think is always a good way to look and say, well, what's happening? Is this a joint issue? Is it a soft tissue issue? Is it a
Mhm.
stability issue? Like is it a coordination issue? Is it an understanding of the exercise issue? Like all those things come into play.
Yeah.
Thinking about the squat, I'm thinking of one client who I had as a student a long time ago in a Coraline class, and we had a little bit of an argument, and it was interesting because we were doing squat on the Coraline, which for those of you who don't know, you're kind of holding on to the ladder, and then you come down into a squat, and then you're basically moving one leg forward, one leg back, and she and I was talking about a squat and how in a squat you typically tip forward a bit, so you're flexing at the hip, you're flexing at the knee, you're dorsiflexing at the ankle, all those 3 points are working. And she was like, well, I was taught as a young woman that when you sit down, you never tip, you never flex at the hips. So she was taught that the polite way to sit was to basically plie, essentially from a dance slang,
Right,
to
right.
come down with your back against a wall rather than come back up, because that was more elegant than leaning forward and coming up.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because what I realized there was that how somebody does something, it may be just totally unconscious. They've never thought about this. They don't know, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
sometimes it's because they have an idea of what they are supposed to do that has
Mhm.
informed everything moving forward.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time in sports performance. It happens all the time in Pilates. I'm sure it happens in personal training too. Somebody said,
All the time.
this is what a squat should be. So I should be able to do this. And then you realize, like, structurally, that is never going to happen for you. And it shouldn't
Mhm.
happen for you because that's actually destructive to your system. So,
Yep.
part of movement analysis is not just the biomechanics, but also what are the kind of psychological assumptions behind what that should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's getting a little subtle, but I find that all the time.
No, it's very, very true. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone come to me who is our age, who did a lot of aerobics classes in the 80s or something,
Yeah,
or a lot of ab classes. And every time they go to do a roll up, they squeeze their butt and they tuck their tailbone before they ever move their upper torso.
right,
Like,
right.
wait a minute, that should stay neutral. You're moving toward it. You're not meeting in the middle, you're moving toward it. But how they learned and doing thousands of repetitions years ago is still ingrained and
Yeah,
hardwired into them now.
absolutely.
And squats are the same thing. Improperly doing lunges, so many exercises that we see. I mean, in the squat, how many times have you seen someone squat down good and they come up and what do? They squeeze their butt, they tuck their tailbone under at the top because that
Right.
was something they learned in some class
Somewhere.
somewhere in the past.
Somewhere. Yeah.
And now that is hardwired in after repetition upon repetition. And it's hard to retrain that sometimes. And it can be subtle, but you have to say, oh, something just doesn't look right. And your example is great because I've met a number of people who were dancers and you get them to try and squat and they can't squat.
No,
They
they'll
can't
plie.
tilt forward. They all plie. It's like, okay, we need to
Yeah,
retrain this because that
yeah.
may work for you today, but in reality, in real life, you need to be able to transfer that weight forward and keep your shoulders, over where your center of gravity is. And it can be hard to train. It can be hard to reteach.
Yeah, I've taught less now because there's more crossover now between personal training and Pilates than there used to be. Now there's quite a lot, which is really nice. But I know, I remember teaching a squat this is many, many years ago at a conference, and just like, okay, everybody, let's just squat. And it was like the variety around the room. This was, experienced teachers, experienced movers was remarkable. I mean, there was everything
Yeah.
from the full plie to like practically 90 degrees down and every single range in between.
Yeah.
It was fascinating, where the hips were, where the feet were, where the knees were, where the back was. It was just like literally the whole rainbow was there in front of me, and it
Mhm.
was interesting because that showed what they're thinking the exercise is, or what they've been
Mhm.
taught the exercise is, or what they're unconsciously doing, depending on what their background was. And it was just really interesting to see that the many variations of a simple exercise that we do all the time. Down up off the toilet, down up off a chair, in and out of your
Mhm.
car. Like, this is not something you don't do every day.
Yep.
So it was really fascinating to watch that.
I also find, and with a lot of our sedentary clients, that they think of a squat as being one thing, but getting up and down out of a chair is something different.
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't see that as being the same thing. So you ask them to squat and they go into exercise mode. I need to take my feet hip width apart. I need to do, and it's like, calm down. You don't have to put that much effort into it. Just go down and come up. And that's why sometimes teaching sitting down, standing up is a little easier because when you say, okay, you just did a squat, you can see a light bulb go off. Oh,
Hmm.
really? I guess it is. Say, okay, now we need to adjust that a little bit. Let's fine tune this. I'm very big, as you know, don't make the client wrong, fine tune. Just, okay, we're going to fine tune this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. Make small adjustments and changes rather than say, oh, that was horrible.
Right. That sucked.
That sucked. Yeah. So,
That never works.
exactly. Unless you know the client and you want to be jokey about it. But a lot
Right.
of
Right.
times
Right.
it's, we want to fine tune this. So let's try this. Let's try this. And that can make a huge difference. But again, a lot of it comes down to that movement analysis on our part to train our eyes to what do we see and you're the first person that clued me in on this. What's the one thing that we can change first that's going to make the biggest difference?
If
What's
you
the
can
one
identify
cue?
it.
If you can.
If you can, yeah.
And sometimes it's the cue you give them, but other times it's for our own benefit. Is it lack of dorsiflexion?
Right.
Is it lumbopelvic stability? Is it
Yep.
just balance? Do they only have their
Yep.
weight in their heels? Sometimes it's for our benefit. What's the one thing I need to work on and change over the next week, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, whatever it is? What's the one thing that I need to work on to get this skill to be where it needs to be?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So thinking about playing with squat a bit, which is again simple and complex at the same time. And
Mhm.
I think talked through a lot of ways to think about that. Like what's their one of the pieces we haven't talked about there, we talked a little bit of pelvic stability and just like finding that pelvic positioning. We've
Mhm.
talked a bit about just structural differences and how to modify for that. We've looked at things like mobility and the ankles is the typical thing for that. The other thing is strength, right? Just
Yeah.
basic, do they have leg strength? And sometimes I know for some of my clients, I start, because again, like Brian, I work with a lot of clients with injuries and older clients and stuff. I'll start with things like, I mean, I've said this before, touch and goes on the reformer foot bar. So just having them stand in front of it and like they're squatting down, it's not very far, touch their butt to it and stand back up, touch their butt to it and
Yep.
stand back up. So it's a very small squat, but it gives them that idea of doing it and doing it repetitively and doing it
Mhm.
with some alignment and some awareness. Thinking
Mhm.
about footwork on the reformer. Footwork on the reformer is fundamentally a squat, which is wonderfully regressed.
Yes.
Right. It's not quite the same positioning, but you can get a lot of the key strength elements going. So you can regress by taking that very light, build up their quad and hamstring and glute strength and their core stability and all that, and then take that up into a standing position.
Yep.
And all of those are kind of ways to just again regress it, build up the strength for it. Strength is, as I think you would agree with me, generally easier to build than mobility.
Oh,
If
yes.
somebody really has a dorsiflexion limitation,
Mhm.
I'm working with one client who's not very flexible there. We're working on it. I think that'll take. I don't actually know how far we can go. I think it will
Yeah.
take a long time to really change that. And I'm not sure how far we can go because there's joint limitations. There's joint mechanics that are just gonna, arthrokinematics aren't gonna let that ankle go any farther into that dorsiflexion, perhaps.
Yeah.
So you do what you can with the soft tissue, which takes time to change, and then you've got the joint limitations, which may just be what they are.
And sometimes it also comes down to beginning their awareness of where their body is. And a lot of
Yes,
times getting up
yes,
and down out of a chair or something, I find that most of my older clients, especially over the age of 50, have a tendency to put all their weight in their heels when they try and stand up. They're not really transferring their weight forward. And the older we get, the more we see that. But
right.
something
That's
like,
right.
but when you look at something like doing the reformer footwork, I'll have them on their toes.
Right,
I could take the heels out of it altogether,
right.
and I can have them really feel, okay, can you feel how you're pushing through your toes right now? Because the heels aren't connected to anything. So sometimes just making them aware of that again and giving them, taking away part of the exercise, the heels being on the ground, changes it for them. So they say, yes, I do feel that. Say, okay, you may feel your knees a little bit more. That's okay. It's all right if you feel them as long as there's no pain. Do you feel your quadriceps? And we can build up some strength that way and begin to work with that so that when we do take them back, I can say, now, remember how you felt being more on your toes. Can you achieve
Yes,
that? Can you feel that again on the
yeah.
floor? And I mean, almost to a person, they say yes. And then I see them do it better.
So that's a classic example. I love what you just said, right? It's like, okay, identifying what's happening, their weight is moving towards their heels. How do I bring awareness to a new pattern?
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times in mood analysis, is like, okay, how do I make them aware that they could do something, they could make a different choice? Yeah. So bringing awareness to it. And then the key thing too is immediately connecting that back to where you wanted to land.
Yep.
Right? Because you could notice that in somebody squatting. You could have them do footwork. You could have them go through a whole program, not go back to squatting with that new awareness, and you would not have changed that pattern.
Correct.
Right. So a lot of
100%.
teaching is like, okay, feel this thing, feel this new experience. Now let's transfer this to where we want you to feel it, which in this case would be a squat.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
that's that like connecting the dots. People's body mind connection is funny, and people's awareness in their body is often a little hazy or unclear, and the more direct we can make those connections, the
Yeah.
better. don't take this the wrong way, but all of our bodies are stupid. They need, they don't, you can't just give them kind of a broad, general, like, well, just move better. That does not help. You have to
No.
actually go, this is how I'm going to help you to move better. Feel this. Okay, you feel that? Okay, now you can feel that. All right, now feel that in this exercise. Feel that when
Yep.
you move this way. And
Yep.
that's how you actually make the change.
Yeah, I
And
love
I've
that.
said it. Yeah, you're right. You gotta literally connect the dots. And that's a lot of what movement analysis is about, is understanding what dots are missing, trying to give them an awareness of that dot or improve that dot, and then try to connect that dot into your final goal, whatever that goal is.
And that's the key, is the connecting the dots. Because I often see that that's the missing link when people are trying
Yeah.
to do that, because
Yeah.
they're able to analyze. I see a lot of trainers who are able to analyze, and Pilates instructors, they can say, okay, this is what they need. And they do the thing. They get whatever they want out of it. But if they don't bring it back around to the original skill, if they don't do that, they're missing that. And then when you have them a month from now do that same skill again, if you haven't connected the dot, it's hit or miss whether or not they're going to be able to achieve that, because you haven't pointed it out to them and let them know, here's the reason for that. Here's what you're feeling. Can you feel this? Can you be aware of this position? We talk about that all the time with the spine, where we're talking about dynamic lumbopelvic control, getting them into the correct position and getting them there and say, now, can you feel this? Can you feel this when you're standing, when you're sitting, when you're
Yes.
moving? If you can't connect that dot, asking them to do it in an activity like tennis or a lunge or something else, they're missing that dot. So you're asking them to go from A to Z without filling in the rest of the letters.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I think, and again, this is where when you work with a really good teacher, and I'm hoping all of you out there have worked with a really good instructor at some point, and you've had one of those moments of, oh, now I get it. That little moment of enlightenment when you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's what they mean when they say, bend your knees or whatever it is. There's that moment of like, okay, now you get it. And when you get it, that's when change can happen. And I'm hoping you've all had that experience, because I feel like that's our job, is to help our
Yes.
clients have aha moments,
Mm-hmm.
important aha moments, and then you want to reinforce that aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
One little cautionary tale, this is one of my little learning moments, was I got Coraline in my studio, and I had never had Coraline in the studio, and I was a Pilates teacher. So I did some work standing, but not a lot. I did a lot of work, supine and prone and seated and kneeling, all fours. And I had this one client who I'd been working with for a long time, and she looked great on the reformer. She looked great.
Mm-hmm.
Lying down, footwork, pelvis was in good place. She could manage all that. I took her up to the Coraline, and I think I'd been working with her for 8 years at that point. And just having her in an upright position, doing some simple alternate, like reciprocal leg motion, it was as if I had taught her nothing.
Yeah.
Like literally every one of the bad patterns that I remembered from our first session was there.
Yes.
And that was, if I needed to learn the lesson of training is extremely specific, that's when I learned it. And it
Yeah.
was horrifying. Like, it was horrifying. So
Yeah.
that's where, if you're trying to get a skill together, like squatting or lunging or getting up and down off the floor or lifting something up or throwing a tennis ball, whatever you're trying to do, do the work, do the pieces, but then bring
Mm-hmm.
it back to that skill, right? Bring it back to that exact skill, not something like it, not a piece of it, but try to bring it back to that exact skill, because that's what's going to actually make the change in that, again, connecting all of the dots for that client.
Yeah.
And don't
And
don't don't assume they'll connect the dots on their own,
on their
based on
own.
whatever you've done.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we were talking with Tom, he mentioned how many repetitions it takes to make a new pattern. And I think he said 300, 3,000, where 300 to make a new pattern. That's a lot. That's an awful lot. And if you
I love
don't
it.
really get them to realize, Here's the reason why we're doing it. Here's what your focus needs to be on. And here's what we've built up to. So again, teaching them where the dots are, connecting those dots for them, not only giving them the skill to get to that final skill, but then connecting all those dots. You're never going to be able to get those 300 good repetitions because old
Right.
patterns can fall back in, especially if you're having people do things at home. I highly, highly recommend homework, homework, homework. However, you're not there. They're on their
Right.
own.
The bad thing about homework is you're not really sure what they're doing. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not.
Exactly. So they could be going back to those old patterns. So unless you tell them the reason why you're changing the pattern and how you're changing the pattern for the better and what that's going to give them in the end, you have to give them worth, value. They're not going to be invested in it so that they're going to be like, okay, I'm doing squats, and they'll go back into those old habits. And I've seen
Yep,
that 1,000
exactly.
times.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so that's a really good point of establishing the pattern and then repetition. And one of the things that I'm talking about the Pilates environment specifically here is one of the things we often do in the Pilates environment is we do a few reps of a lot of different things. Right? We don't tend to do 3 sets of 20 reps of anything. That's just not the usual way that's done in a Pilates studio. However, we're often touching the same skill from many different angles. So
Yes.
one of the powerful tools I've used often in the studio is, let's say I'm working on dorsiflexion, for example, to go back to our squat example. I'll work on dorsiflexion in footwork. I may even work on it in feet-in straps. I'll have them, if I've got those nice Y loops or something that can hold their feet in position, I might work on it there. I might work on it in knee stretch. I might work on
Mhm.
it even when they're doing some standing work. So I will take it in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different areas, but I'll focus on the same skill. And that
Mhm.
I find is also a nice way to help transfer that skill to multiple activities,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It goes back to three-dimensional training. You don't
Yeah,
just train in one way. You hit it from as many different angles as you can for many different reasons. One, you want to affect a change, and in order to do that, you need to hit it from different angles because either gravity is going to be affected by it or the spring resistance or however we're going to load it. But we also want to make sure that it's there no matter how they challenge it in real life, because that's
right.
really what it comes down to is
Yeah,
in real life, how is it going to be challenged? Because if they need that for a specific skill, or let's say they take up a new sport or something, tennis, pickleball, whatever, and suddenly they're asking a lot more of it in a different way, you want to make sure that they have that strength and skill hardwired in and infused in that area already.
right. And able to occur because we want to make it unconsciously competent, right?
Unconscious.
Is kind of
Yep.
our ultimate goal. If you're moving fast, if you're in an unexpected situation, if you're playing sports of any kind, those patterns have to be hardwired in there because you are not conscious of
100%.
them. If you're
Yep.
responding to a ball or you're responding to a running 2-year-old, like you are not thinking, oh, I must flex my hips. Like you're not, no. hopefully
Nope.
hopefully that's not happening. Right.
Yep.
You're just responding. And
Yep.
again, if you really train that, that's at 300, 3,000. If you really train that pattern that deeply, then it's there for you no matter what,
Mhm.
when it's called upon. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So breaking this down for movement analysis, because we've covered a lot of different areas, I think let's sort of summarize. I think
Yep.
when we look at it first, let's take the squat or a lunge or any type of exercise, any type of skill that we want to achieve or tease or whatever we want to do. We want to first watch them and see what they're doing. How are they
Right.
performing it today?
Yes.
And we try and pick a way to have them do it that's going to be safe, that's going to be fairly easy for them, like a squat, getting up and down out of a chair, something simple.
Yes.
And
I want to say one thing there at that first step, which is
sure.
let them do it the way they do it.
Oh, 100%.
Do not over cue them if you're trying to
Oh, yeah.
understand how they do it. So just there we go. So first step is assessment. Go on. Yeah.
No, that is, in my opinion, the most important
Yeah.
because I can't tell you how many times you have, I see people over cue, overcorrect before they've even gotten the first repetition off.
Hmm.
In my opinion, I think there's a lot of people, trainers, Pilates instructors, whatever, who want to give value and show that I'm doing this for you. I'm trying to get you in the best position possible. But they run their mouth a little more than they're running their eyes. What do you see first? What's their natural pattern? So I love that you said that. I'm very happy you said that. So see, what is their natural pattern? What do we see? How are they performing the exercise? Then, all right, what is missing? Or what is making it look, what's their hitch in their giddy up? What does not look quite so right? And try and be, again, that body detective, picking out, okay, what's the big one, hopefully, or what is missing in a couple of different ways, and really analyzing that part of it.
From there, just like exactly. So what looks funny? Like I love Brian has a wonderful way of talking about assessment, which is what do I see in 10 seconds from 10 feet away? What sticks out?
Yep.
Right? Like what's obviously just a little funky. And then from there, like one of the challenges with that is that the source of the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the hip is doing something weird. Is that the hip that's doing this something weird? That's like your first thing is, okay, let's understand the hip. Then you've got to see, okay, is that really where the root of the problem is, or is it their feet? Or is it their shoulders, or is it their head position? Right? But start with what you see first, right?
Yep.
And figure out if that is where the problem is.
Is it responsible for what you see, or is it a byproduct of something else?
Very well said. Yeah.
And that's a challenge. And that's something it's a skill that you need to create as an instructor in yourself. But again, look at all the things that are missing, all the things that might be going on, and then try and correct one thing at a time. Did that make a difference?
Right.
Did that make a difference? Again, in the squat, you see that they're lacking dorsiflexion. Okay, is it dorsiflexion, or is it proprioception that they're not feeling their toes? So can I make that correction and say, put a little bit more weight in your toes? Does that change things? Oh, as soon as I do that, their heels are way up off the ground. Okay, that's a lack of mobility. Got it. Now I know. Now I have something to work toward that I can work on. If it is, okay, they can put their weight in their toes, but they immediately rock back to their heels. Okay, that's the skill we need to work on. They need to be more proprioceptive into their feet, where their body weight is. You know, breaking down those motions and trying to create, the skill again, to create the greater skill, to, what exercise is going to get them to that bigger picture.
So that's kind of good. So that's kind of step one is seeing what you see and observing. Mm-hmm. Step two is identifying what's funky or what areas are funky, and then trying to figure out, again, cue that area or cue an adjacent area. And then the last piece of that, which I always love, Tom is really clear on this one, which I love working with him with this, is honesty. Like, I can't tell you how many times I see teachers who give the cue they think should work, and then they say, great. And that cue did not work at all. Like, that body did not change. Now,
we've all been guilty of it.
We've all been guilty of it. And sometimes you just give up because like, it's just nothing is happening. Just nothing's happening. And that I get that. But sometimes it's like, no, that, let's just move on. Let's try, try something else. And so there is that experimental phase in your movement analysis of, did that work? No. Did that work? Kind of. Did that work? That worked the best. And, do not assume that just because Brian and I have been teaching for almost more than 60 years between the two of us now, which is frightening, that we get this right the first time. Right? No. We don't. Like I'll try something on the first session with somebody and okay, I get somewhere, and then I try something else, and then I try something else. This is an ongoing experiment. And so, so just don't worry about that. Like, just try something this week. Okay, that got me 5%. Try it again next week. Maybe it gets you a little farther. Try it again the next week. Okay, now I need to do something else because they're making improvement. And just keep that open, but keep honest about whether what you said worked or not. That's the key thing.
And it is trial and error. And I don't even always put it on myself, because the body that they came in with last week is different than the body that I'm seeing today, because what we worked on then, now their body has processed those motions, movements. Hopefully they've done their homework and have gotten maybe better, that a different cue will work today that didn't work last time. Or they're in a different headspace, or sometimes things just hit differently on a different day. So guess what? we're all we're all guilty of, well, that didn't work. Okay, try this one. Well, that didn't work. Well, try this one. And when you find the one that works, great. Don't get hung up on it because it may not be there next time. But that
Right.
definitely is something to think about. And I
And,
think
and so
no, go ahead.
go on. Oh, and to that point too, don't beat a dead horse.
Yes.
Right. If
I
you're
love that.
not, if things are not happening, you've said this a lot, and I just a reminder, right? If you've tried 17 different things and it's not happening and you're not getting what you want, let that exercise go, move
Move
on,
on.
come back to it another time. It's not happening. Sometimes it just isn't happening. And you just gotta let that go.
Yeah. You don't want to frustrate the person either, because
No.
the last thing you need is for you to be throwing 50 different cues at them. Things just are not working. They don't know what to focus in on anymore. Their brain is just fried. Move on. Try one or two cues. If it still doesn't look right, and if it looks like they might be getting injured or setting up bad movement patterns or whatever, just move on,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that one exercise is not going to make or break that person today.
No, presumably, hopefully not.
You know, so find something else that works. And when you do seem to find something that's working, and you do have that thought line now is starting to be created, connect the dots for the client. Go
Yeah.
back to them and say, okay, here's why we are doing that exercise. Now can you feel that here? Oh yeah, all right, good. Now can we do this? Oh, okay. And it'll just, connecting those dots is very and vitally important, because it will help turn their brain around, and you'll get them to be a lot more compliant after that in doing that skill, doing that exercise, because now they know why, what they need to focus on, and they can own it.
And and I think you're saying it, we've said a little bit before, but just to say it in a different way, if you can find the one thing that helps to organize them for that skill,
Yeah.
it's really nice to have one thing that they have to focus on. You know, I think of a lot of my clients a lot of clients with scoliosis over the years, and oftentimes, you know, they have a rib shift to one side, and other things. But basically, I'm thinking about the rib shift now. And if I just say, okay, let's just bring your ribs over your pelvis. And then they do that in their seated work. They do that in their supine work. They do that in their prone work. They do that in all fours. They do that in standing. Like and that's just the same cues. Like bring your ribs over
Yep.
your pelvis or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that organizes everything. That gives us a foundation. For other
Mhm.
clients, it's like, where's your low back position? Right? Like for a lot of my low back clients, I harp on that in every single exercise.
Oh
Are
yeah.
you flexed? Are you extended? Are you in the neutral or the position that works best for you? No? Okay, then fix that, right? Fix that in seated, fix that in supine, fix that in standing.
Yeah.
And that's where, if you can find something like that for a client, that's where I find change can happen really quickly or
Yeah.
more quickly. If they've got one thing to focus on, not 12, they've got one thing to focus on that kind of helps to really organize everything or a lot of things. That's really where I often find the most benefit long term, is just find those one or two things. And then maybe we change that, right? A couple of months later, now there's a new thing for you to focus on. But keeping that going.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a great way for us to sort of bring this together in general with movement analysis. And I'm glad we took the time today to sort of hit on this from all different angles,
Yeah.
because we talk about this a lot in some of our other, episodes, but we did never broke it down to this significant a degree.
Right. Right. We weren't this blunt about it. We didn't connect
Yeah.
the dots.
We didn't connect the dots.
We didn't connect the
Exactly.
dots. So
It was
now we're
our fault.
connecting our
We
own
forgot
dots.
that. But now you can see why it's so important is when you're working with the client, get them to want to do the exercise properly. They want to please you. They want to
Yeah,
feel good,
absolutely.
and they
Absolutely.
want to move better. And like you said, just telling them, well, move better isn't going to work. So it's our job to get them there, and it's our job to break it down, build them up, give them the skills that they need, connect the dots, and then hopefully they're able to do it and be able to do it unconsciously and be incredibly competent about it in the long term.
Exactly.
Yeah. We covered a lot today.
That was, I don't know about you guys out there, but I really enjoyed that. It's nice to be able to articulate a
Yeah.
process that I know for me is very, is at this point, mostly unconscious or intuitive, if you want to call it that. But it's really nice to bring that out because that really is the process, the effective process of teaching. And I
Yeah.
just really enjoyed that. Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
It's also nice to be reminded and
Yeah.
to be reminded from someone else about things that, yes, we know, but sometimes it's nice to be like, oh, yeah. You may forget about a finer detail and be like, yeah, you know what? Have I been connecting the dots with everybody? I think so. But now it's more on the forefront of my mind. So I'm going to make sure about that. So sometimes hearing it can really bring that forth. So thank you very much. And thank you all. We really appreciate every single person who listens every week. It is so, so important to us that we're able to give something of value to you. So thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate it. Do hit that like and subscribe button. Share this. Tell all your friends. We really appreciate every one of you. If you want to get in touch with us, movingcombos@gmail.com is the best way, or you can direct message us on Instagram. Moving Combos on Instagram is another way to get to it, or check out the show notes for Nora's and my personal social media accounts as well. Hit us up there. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. So until next week, for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you next time.
All right, guys.